Hi, everyone. We're group two. I'm Connor.
I'm Henry.
I'm Nathan.
I'm Olivia.
And our position in this debate is that Google is not a monopoly in the online search market. While it's true that Google is the dominant search engine by a wide margin, we argue that its market power comes from legitimate competitive advantages, things like product quality, network effects, and economies of scale, rather than anti-competitive behavior. Over the next few minutes, we'll walk through the structure of the market, explain why users continue to choose Google, and show that its position doesn't meet the standard for harmful monopoly power. I'll begin by giving an overview of the online search market and how Google fits into it. I want to start by clarifying what we actually mean by the online search market. This is the part of the internet where search engines like Google, Bing, DuckDuckGo, and others help users find web pages, products, definitions, answers, and more. For users, these services are free. You type in a query, get results instantly, and never pay anything directly. But that doesn't mean the market isn't making money. In fact, the money comes from the other side, advertisers. Companies pay to have their websites shown prominently when users search for relevant terms. That's why we say this is a two-sided market. Firms like Google compete to attract both users, who bring data and attention, and advertisers, who bring in revenue. Understanding a setup is key because it changes the way we think about competition. It's not just about charging a high price. It's about quality, relevance, speed, and experience. And those are the factors that make Google so successful in this space. So yes, Google dominates this market. As of March 2025, Google holds about 89.7% of global search traffic. That's massive. But the important point here is that dominance doesn't mean a monopoly in the harmful sense. First of all, competitors exist. Bing has about 4% of the market, and there are others like DuckDuckGo and Yahoo that still operate and serve millions of users. And second, switching between these services is extremely easy. On any phone or laptop, changing your default search engine takes less than a minute. There's no technical lock-in. Users aren't being forced to stick with Google, they're choosing to. And if you think about it, Google's size doesn't come from preventing competition. It comes from delivering a product that most people simply prefer. And just to emphasize this point, the existence of real accessible alternatives matters when we're deciding whether a market is competitive. If users can switch and competitors can enter, it's hard to say Google is behaving like a harmful monopoly. Here's where we draw the line between dominance and monopoly power. Dominance means a firm is ahead, maybe far ahead, but it's still facing competitive pressure. Monopoly power, on the other hand, implies the ability to harm rivals or consumers by restricting choice, raising prices, or creating artificial barriers to entry. In Google's case, the dominance comes from high quality, relevant search results, a massive infrastructure of servers and training data, brand trust built over years of consistent performance, and widespread adoption that strengthens performance through network effects. These advantages don't prevent entry or switching, they just make Google hard to beat. Google also benefits from significant returns to scale. The cost of serving an additional user is low, but the quality of results improves as more people use the service. None of this is exclusionary. Google isn't blocking rivals, locking users in, or degrading the product in a way that harms consumers. So while it's dominant, it's not exercising monopoly power in a way that calls for intervention. So let's bring it all together. Even though Google has nearly 90% market share, the market still offers choice. Users aren't locked in. They can and do switch to Bing, DuckDuckGo, and others. That's why we argue that this is a competitive market, just one where one firm happens to be far ahead. And most importantly, there's no sign of consumer harm. The service is fast, free, reliable, and constantly improving. There's no price being raised, no quality being withheld. From a policy perspective, we should be careful not to confuse dominance with wrongdoing. Breaking up or punishing firms just for being popular or effective could lead to worse outcomes for consumers. So our position is clear. Google isn't a harmful monopoly. It's a dominant firm in a competitive market and one that consumers choose to use every day.
Okay, moving on to more about the dominance of Google and why it is. So, Google's size, service, and innovation allows Google to have a 90% market share in the search engine industry. So, firstly, with familiarity and ease of access, so everybody knows Google and everybody uses Google, and this is fully emphasized through Google being the default search engine for Apple, Android, and Chrome. And additionally, the bigger balance sheet with Google due to its sheer size allows for better research and development, which leads to faster and better innovation compared to its competitors. Additionally, Google's massive market share allows for better data feedback from its users and allows for quicker and more accurate search returns. Moving on to Google search engine innovation. So they were the first ones to implement voice search. Again, so if you're busy on the road or something, the voice search and ease of access allows Google to dominate over its competitors. Additionally, its machine learning for detailed searches is also very important. So there's a lot of niche questions and very specific questions being asked in Google search engines, and due to its data feedback and high R&D, the machine learning allows for a more accurate and quick response compared to its competitors. And finally, and thirdly, AI search partner Gemini. So if you've seen recently in Google searches, sometimes an AI service pops up and gives you a quick, detailed summary of the answers. And again, this plays back into Google's R&D and innovation, which allows Google again to be the superior business model out of compared to its competitors. And again, just to reiterate again, is due to the massive data pool and R&D that comes with Google's size. So just kind of to wrap it all up again, so Google's size, service, and innovation allows Google to dominate the market. This is completely a legal competitive advantage that allows Google to be the best, as there's no switching cost and there is no barrier of entry. And due to this positive feedback loop and good management decisions, this leads to Google maintaining its massive market share.
So next we can look into network effects in the online search market and specifically see how Google is affected by this and also plays a role in this. So network effects is essentially the idea that with rising usage for a company in its customer base, they're also able to get rising value. So the more people they're able to add as customers, the better their company is able to perform. And Google utilizes this idea very well and to its advantage because Google relies heavily on customer data. And so the more customers they have, the more data they're able to analyze and then build products and ideas off of. And the key here is that alternatives are not being restricted. Other companies are still able to operate with this. They're able to potentially even use this themselves. Anything that Google does with network effects is really solely impacting itself, and it's not inhibiting any other alternatives from being able to do the same thing. And the graphic below sort of highlights this idea where with more users, you get a bigger network, which improves your value proposition, which then gives you more users, and the cycle continues. And Google really is at the forefront of this idea. Next, we can look at economies of scale versus monopoly behavior and really see how Google fits into this. So, of course, economies of scale represents the idea that the more a company is able to scale, the more it's able to sort of reduce its costs both internally and externally, which is obviously going to allow it to scale even further. And Google's platform enables it to do this well because they have many cost-effective measures. Oftentimes, when Google is rolling out new technology, they do it in a cost-effective way. And again, another important idea is that the entry for new players is still being retained. Even with Google operating this way, other companies can still enter into the space and also succeed in it with multiple different ways for them to diversify. One way is to just increase their product line and release new technology and sort of compete with Google that way. A second way would be to sort of use AI. Companies like Bing have been more open to doing this and sort of trying to build out different AI applications as a way to compete with Google. And the third way would be an extension of that, which is like sort of using cloud technology, which would help with storage of data, security of data, and just overall help a startup or a new company in this space be able to sort of scale in a way that Google was able to when it was first getting started. Next, we can look at a rebuttal to antitrust claims. So, of course, with Google being claimed to be a monopoly by many people, it's important to understand why this may not necessarily be the case. As we've discussed, Google's dominance is not exclusive. It's not as though Google is sort of just operating in a way which crushes all of its competitors and doesn't allow them to be in the online search market. They aren't really doing this, and many ongoing investigations on this exact point have been inconclusive. They haven't definitively labeled Google as a monopoly, and more so have just been trying to investigate exactly how Google has been carrying out its business. And Google also faces competition in alternative venues. Beyond just the online search market, Google has many further competitors. And so it's unfair to label Google as purely a monopoly based off of just their operations alone.
Though the U.S. Department of Justice has proposed several major actions to reduce Google's dominance. separating Chrome from search, banning default search deals with companies like Apple, prohibiting self-preferencing in search results, and increasing ad system transparency. But we have to ask, do they fix a real market failure, or could they reduce efficiency and consumer benefits? So in traditional monopoly models, regulation is used to fix inefficiency, usually deadweight loss from price exceeding marginal cost. But Google's search model doesn't fit that pattern. Search is free to users, and the marginal cost of providing one more search is nearly zero. Why? Because once Google builds its infrastructure, like data centers and indexing systems, it can serve millions of users without much added cost. So in our graph, MC is flat and zero, and price is also zero. This means output is at the efficient level, P equal to MC, and there's no deadweight loss. Instead, consumer surplus is large, and users get a high-value service at no cost. So now let's consider the possible downside. If regulation raises Google's effective marginal cost, say by breaking up integrated services, that cost curve shifts up. The effective price increases, not in dollars, but through degraded user experience. In our new graph, that creates deadweight loss and shrinks consumer surplus. So rather than correcting inefficiency, the regulation may cause it by reducing total welfare without delivering real competitive gains. So what does this mean in the real world? Google may cut back on features or reduce how well its platforms work together. Free tools might get downgraded or cluttered with more ads. The market moves away from maximizing total surplus, and Google may reduce incentives to innovate. So this isn't just a theoretical concern. It affects the experience of millions of users. Instead of helping consumers, they might leave them worse off. So instead of structural separations, we recommend targeted, lower-cost interventions. First, regulation should be segment-specific. For example, regions like South Korea already have strong competitors. Tailoring policy avoids disrupting efficient markets. Second, transparency in default settings empowers users to choose alternatives, increasing competition without reducing service quality. Third, open access to ad tool and data lowers barriers to entry by giving smaller firms what they need to compete without raising marginal costs. Overall, this approach can maintain allocative efficiency and preserve the high consumer surplus. And that's it. Thank you.